Just take a look at this promotional video from the 1950s.
The attractive home of John and Margaret Bryant, the home they've always dreamed of, the happiest investment they have ever made.
But the mindset has clearly changed in the last decades.
Your house is not an asset.
No one should buy a home.
What happened? Should we all now forget about the American dream altogether? Today, we'll figure out why many say that buying a house to live in is the worst investment. And after watching this video, you know how to invest in real estate to earn a steady income and build your wealth. Is buying a house a good investment? 57% of American financial and real estate experts say that it is. But this number also means that almost half of them are either against this investment or claim that it depends. The truth is that this is a very controversial question, and the reality often isn't what we expect it to be. But today, we'll figure it out. A good place to start will be to talk about debts. If you've been following us for quite some time, you will know the concept of good and bad debt. Good debt involves borrowing money to invest, using the returns to cover the interest payments, allowing you to grow your wealth. For instance, a mortgage for a rental property is considered good debt. On the other hand, bad debt can provide short-term gains without investment opportunities, and in the end, it leads to eventual losses. For instance, credit card debt and any type of personal debt are generally bad for your long-term financial situation, unless you use those credit cards to invest. And many also say that a mortgage to buy a house to live in is nothing more than a bad debt. How is it possible? If we constantly hear people saying that buying your home is very profitable, you get a roof over your head and you can live by your own rules, and 10 years later, you can sell this house for 2 or even 3 times the original cost. This is the American dream we all know about. But despite these beliefs, some complexities may make it harder than it seems. Now, let's find out why.
For most people, their houses are not assets or liability.
Meet Robert Kiyosaki. He's an entrepreneur, businessman, and author. Robert Kiyosaki was one of the first who openly said that buying your home is one of the worst investments you can ever make. He mentioned that in his 1997 bestseller book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But as you can imagine, back then, such a claim was met with even more controversy than these days, because today, many people are also convinced that buying their own home is one of the most profitable investments of their lives.
Because your home is not your asset, your home is actually your bank's asset.
This statement generated a lot of debate. Let's go through his argument together from the beginning and understand why home ownership is the worst investment according to the entrepreneur. Let's imagine the situation. You take a mortgage in the bank totaling $450,000 to buy your home. Then you live in this house for 10 years and decide to sell it. Let's say it got some appreciation over time and now its market value is $550,000. Well, $100,000 sounds like a pretty good profit, but it's actually not. Now you'll understand why. Most likely, you will need to renovate the house. You will also want to buy furniture, and probably you will need some landscaping or garage reworks. During the time you live there, you will repair the plumbing, optimize the electrical system, and quite possibly the security system. In addition, you will have to pay your property taxes and make a mortgage payment. On average, over these 10 years, you will invest at least twice the original cost of your home. And we're not even talking about inflation of around 3% per year, and even higher lately. That's why Kiyosaki claims that you are not dealing with assets, but with liabilities, which means that you sacrifice your economic benefits instead of generating cash flow. In this case, those $100,000 you're supposedly making, thanks to the home appreciation, don't seem to be much of a big profit after all. Now, imagine if your house value didn't grow at all or even decrease during those 10 years, and you have to sell urgently to get money. This is an example of how your own home might drive you further and further into debt instead of giving you financial freedom.
There's not one report in the history of the world, 7 billion people, of anyone creating financial freedom because they bought a house.
But in reality, it's usually a terrible investment.
In the US, the total mortgage debt is over $12 trillion. Mortgages account for over 70% of the total consumer debt in the US. Each person with a mortgage, on average, carries around $143,000 in debt. There is more to that. Just imagine that over 6.5 million homes are sold in the US each year. The median value of an American home is over $500,000, with California, Massachusetts, and Colorado being the most expensive states. But why do over 65% of Americans own a home if it's a bad investment? There can be several reasons for buying a home. Apart from the American dream coming true, it gives you a feeling of freedom and protection. You can live by your own rules and create the most comfortable place for yourself. But what if I told you that the advantages of owning a house for living end right here?
I keep telling you guys, homes are a terrible investment.
Homes were not built for people. Homes were built for banks.
The sad truth is that when you get a house of your own, it will only bring in extra expenses, except for the cases where you plan the whole investment property scene and decide to rent it out. Otherwise, home ownership for a living does not provide you with any cash flow.
You have to have cash flow to assist you through contraction.
Let's imagine a hypothetical $416,100 home, which is the national median sales price of a house in Q2 2023. And let's say that the homeowners stay in for 10 years. We said earlier that while living in a home for a certain period, you will invest in it in every way possible. Yet we did not mention how much taxes and other expenses you will face, especially when getting a mortgage. Generally, you will pay the following: the bank interest payment, which is now at around 6.5 to 7.5% yearly. This means that over the 10 years, you will pay roughly around $290,000 to your bank alone. And now, think about it. This is around 70% of your house price on top of its actual value. Next come property taxes. Depending on your state, they will range from 0.29% in Hawaii to 2.47% in New Jersey. If we take the home from our example and count the effective property tax rate of 1.10%, we'll end up spending over $45,000 in 10 years. This is around 10% of your home's price. And then you will have a whole list of other expenses, such as utilities, home maintenance and repairs, property insurance, mortgage insurance if your down payment was below 20%, and you can also get homeowners association fees if you're buying a condo or a townhouse. Besides, you can even have to pay school taxes destined to cover schools' development and improvement in your area. We won't count these costs for example because it is hard to measure it, as it will greatly depend on every particular case. Still, you should remember that owning a house requires more expenses than your mortgage payments and closing costs. If we return to our example, the very minimum of extra spendings we get in 10 years is $335,000 without utilities, insurance, repair, etc. And this is on top of the $416,100 value of the house. In total, we end up paying at least $751,000. This should be the sales price in the house in 10 years to cover the original price paid and all the expenses. But mind you, even if the value of the house almost doubles in 10 years, you still won't earn anything. You will simply break even. And also, realistically, it's going to be extremely difficult to sell a house for twice as much money compared to what you bought it for 10 years before, because real estate doesn't usually appreciate this much in such a short period of time.
Paying off your house was like a bomb just waiting to go off.
The real issue is that when you compare monthly payments for buying and renting a home, you only look at one side. You check how much you have to pay monthly for your rent and your mortgage. And often, we just skipped all the other costs.
You don't buy a house based on the price of the house. You buy it based on the monthly payment.
But what are the real disadvantages of buying a home for a living? Well, first of all, we have to remember that 63% of Americans, homeowners, have a mortgage. And using a mortgage is a great tool, but it also means you overpay the original cost of a home at least twice. This is due to high taxes and banking costs. When getting a house for yourself, you will need to cover many expenses. These are associated with repairs, replacements of furniture and appliances, and landscaping of the territory. Besides, by purchasing a house, you tie yourself to a particular location. This might not be an issue for many. Still, some people will feel pressure because of this. The fact is that after 10 years living in the same neighborhood, the situation of your neighborhood may change. For example, it can become less favorable for living. And because of this, it will be more difficult for you to sell the house. As a result, when investing in a home for a living, you will mostly face expenses and possibly not get any profits in return. And that's the main problem. But what if I told you that despite all those downsides, you can still buy a house with a mortgage and get passive income from it? The only difference is that you will buy real estate not to live there, but to rent it out. And that will be the very example of a good debt.
So real estate is, to me, the best vehicle, but you've got to be smart with it.
Did you know that more than 35% of households in the US rent homes? About 74% of all renters belong to Gen Zs. In general, the typical asking rent is about $2,062. The fast growth of rent costs since 2020 derives from various factors, including inflation, lack of inventory, and higher demand to live alone due to the pandemic. But still, the current asking rent is about 13% lower than the average monthly mortgage payment. That means many people are more likely to favor rented housing over their own.
I treat houses like hospitals. You know, you get in, you get out.
That's why you can use this tendency and rent out your home to get passive income from it.
But passive income, which is cash flow, is never taxed.
Robert Kiyosaki has his own vision of how to do it right. In his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he offered the BRRRR Method, which literally means buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat.
The beauty about real estate is you learn to use debt to get rich.
Let's go through this strategy step by step. Consider buying a property that needs some fixing. These distressed homes often face foreclosure or are owned by the banks and can be bought at a lower price. Then calculate the post-renovation value by comparing it with similar properties in the area. Keep in mind such factors as size, age, bedrooms, bathrooms, and condition. Later, you can renovate the property to meet rental standards, boosting its value and appeal to renters. This way, you can turn budget homes into desirable spaces. On average, renovation costs range from $25,000 to $75,000. Yet, it is a very rough estimate, and of course, it depends. Self-labor can cut your expenses significantly as contractors are pricey. So if there's something you can do yourself, consider that to save some money. Plan the changes you want to make, set a budget, and secure permits before starting a project. After buying, everyone wants to rent the house out as fast as possible, but make sure your renters are reliable because the rush at the very beginning can create additional problems later on. You can use a variety of platforms to search for renters and always perform a full screening of your potential candidates. The next step is to refinance your home for affordable funds. I know that now the rates are higher than they used to be, but in this video, I share why it shouldn't stop you. So feel free to check it out after you're done with this episode. Besides, you can try a home equity line of credit, also known as a HELOC. This instrument lets borrowers withdraw funds up to a set limit, repay, and then access funds again. HELOCs allow you to leverage your home equity even though you haven't paid it in full. Finally, in the BRRRR real estate strategy comes the repeat step. To continue, refinance your initial property and extract funds for expanding your investment portfolio. How would it all look in practice? Well, Imagine starting off with a property priced at $200,000. After a $50,000 down payment and a $150,000 loan, you invest $40,000 for rehab. The property value rises to $320,000 in a year. Refinancing a 60% of the appraised value of $320,000 gives you $122,000, which you can use to reinvest. Also, remember that you will get a monthly rent payment. It is hard to say what it will be, but let's assume it will be somewhere around what the average Americans are paying for rent right now, $1,326. This will mean almost $16,000 yearly. Of course, the occupancy rate might not always be 100, but you can minimize these risks by looking for reliable tenants. As you can see, by taking out a mortgage or other types of loans, you can invest that money in rental housing. That will require a certain amount of investment from you in the beginning, but the loan will pay off over time and your investments will start bringing in passive income from real estate. Still, you have to pay attention to current market trends, the area where you get a house, potential tax questions, and your own financial situation.
Donald and I love real estate. I love real estate. I think it's the best thing going.
Of course, if you want to get your own home to fulfill the American dream, there is nothing wrong with that. Still, you shouldn't expect it to be a profitable investment. It can be your place of peace, and no one can talk to you out of this. If you don't expect to earn money with it, just go for it. But at the same time, if you're looking for a profitable investment, it is better to buy a house to rent it out. The choice, it's all yours. What are your thoughts? Feel free to share them below in the comments. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.